The ledger didn't lie. That was the first principle Marcus Webb had learned when Bumpy Johnson brought him into the organization in 1939. Numbers don't care about feelings. Numbers don't care about loyalty. Numbers just are. And on a cold Tuesday morning in March 1952, the numbers told a story that nobody wanted to believe. $200,000 was missing. Not stolen in a single dramatic night. Stolen slowly, methodically, over 18 months by someone with access, someone trusted, someone who understood exactly how the system worked well enough to exploit it without triggering alarms. Someone on the inside. But here's what most people don't understand about organized crime: the biggest threat isn't the external enemy. It's the person sitting at your table eating your food, nodding while you talk, smiling while they plan your destruction. That person is worse than any police captain or rival gang. That person is metastasis. Bumpy Johnson knew this. And in 1952, when Marcus Webb walked into his office with a ledger that didn't add up, Bumpy made a decision that would take 6 months to execute and would teach every person in Harlem something about power that violence alone could never teach. He decided to wait. Not to act immediately. Not to call a meeting and demand explanations. But to audit his own empire and find out exactly how deep the rot went. And what he discovered would shake the foundation of everything he'd built. To understand what happened in 1952, you need to understand who Marcus Chen was before he became a thief. Marcus arrived in Harlem in 1938 from San Francisco, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses and a ledger under his arm. He was 24 years old and he had a gift that would become increasingly valuable in the criminal underworld: he could make money invisible. Not literally invisible. But he could move it through channels, hide it in subsidiary accounts, distribute it across multiple banks and dummy corporations in ways that made it nearly impossible for authorities to trace. Numbers were his language. Accounting was his instrument. And in 1939, when Bumpy Johnson was consolidating power over Harlem's numbers racket, he needed exactly this kind of person. Bumpy was 23 years old. Already had a reputation. Had been to prison. Had survived gang wars. Had learned that the numbers game wasn't just about collecting bets and paying winners. It was about managing cash flow, understanding where money went, building systems that could sustain millions of dollars moving through the streets every single week without triggering federal investigation. That's where Marcus came in. "You handle the money," Bumpy told him at their first meeting in a basement social club on 135th Street. "I handle everything else. You make sure that what comes in gets distributed correctly. You make sure the collectors are honest. You make sure the payouts happen on time. You make sure the feds never see patterns." Marcus nodded. "What's my percentage?" 5% of everything that moves through your books. Plus salary. $50 a week. In 1939, $50 a week was respectable money. 5% of millions was extraordinary. Marcus took the job. For the next 13 years, Marcus proved himself indispensable. He built the accounting infrastructure that allowed Bumpy's organization to operate at scale. He created subsidiary accounts under false names. He established relationships with sympathetic bank managers, men who looked the other way when large deposits came through without formal documentation. He built redundancy into the system so that if one account got frozen, money could be rerouted through 3 others. More importantly, Marcus made himself irreplaceable. He never wrote anything down except in his personal ledger, which he kept locked in a safe deposit box at Marine Midland Bank under an alias. Only he knew the complete picture of where all the money was, how much there was, where it was going. He was the only person in the entire organization who could answer the question, exactly how much money did Bumpy Johnson have? This made Marcus powerful. Powerful in ways that even lieutenants like Illinois Gordon and Marcus Webb weren't. They could command men. They could enforce discipline. They could order retaliation. But Marcus Chen could strangle the entire operation with a single decision. He could disappear with enough money to live comfortably for the rest of his life. For 13 years, he didn't. For 13 years, he was loyal. But loyalty, like everything else in the underworld, has an expiration date. The change was subtle at first. Marcus's wife, Catherine, died in November 1950 from pneumonia. She was 36 years old. They'd been married for 8 years. They didn't have children, which meant Marcus had built his entire life around his wife and his work, in that order. After Catherine died, co-workers noticed Marcus became different. More withdrawn. Less interested in the evening conversations at Small's Paradise where the organization's lieutenants gathered. He started drinking alone. Started taking days off, something he'd never done before. Started missing meetings. Bumpy noticed, as Bumpy noticed everything. He called Marcus in, asked him directly, "You good?" Marcus said yes. He was fine. Just grieving. Would be back to normal soon. He wasn't back to normal soon. In 1951, a year after Catherine's death, Marcus started making mistakes. Small ones. A collector's report didn't match the deposit amounts. A payment was delayed because Marcus said he needed additional time to process the paperwork. Twice, money went missing from holding accounts for a few days before mysteriously reappearing. These weren't catastrophic errors. They were barely noticeable. But they were there. And they broke the pattern that 13 years of perfection had established. Bumpy's lieutenant, Marcus Webb, no relation to Marcus Chen, noticed first. "Boss, Chen's slipping," he said one evening over drinks. "Nothing major yet, but the books are starting to show inconsistencies." Bumpy's response was immediate and surprising, "Leave it alone." Webb thought he'd misheard. "Sir? I said leave it alone. Marcus is grieving. He lost his wife. Give him time." This was unusual. Bumpy wasn't known for patience with operational failures, even small ones. But Marcus Chen had been with him since the beginning. Had built the entire financial structure of the organization from nothing. Had proven his loyalty countless times. A few accounting errors weren't worth destroying a 13-year relationship. So Webb left it alone. And Marcus Chen, not realizing he was being observed, not understanding that Bumpy's patience was calculated rather than compassionate, made a decision that would define the next 18 months. He decided to start stealing. The psychology of embezzlement is interesting. Most people who steal from their employers don't do it because they're desperate or greedy in some abstract sense. They do it because they've rationalized it. They've told themselves a story that makes it justified. Marcus Chen's story went like this. He'd sacrificed 13 years to building Bumpy's empire. He'd made Bumpy millions. He'd taken only what was agreed, 5%, which sounded good on paper but which, when divided across the enormous volume of money flowing through the system, added up to less than he could have made working legitimate jobs. He'd been underpaid relative to his value. He'd been taken for granted. And now, with Catherine dead, with no wife to share his wealth with nothing to look forward to except more years in basements doing invisible work that nobody would ever credit him for, he deserved to take what should have been his all along. The first theft was modest. $20,000, taken from a holding account that was supposed to contain $60,000 waiting for distribution to winners. Marcus simply reduced the recorded total to $40,000. The discrepancy was small enough that it wouldn't trigger immediate alarm. When the money was eventually withdrawn for payouts, there would be confusion about whether the original deposit amount had been recorded incorrectly or whether someone had skimmed. In the chaos of a large operation, these things happened. Nothing happened. No investigation. No alarm bells. No consequences. So Marcus stole again. $30,000 this time, over the next month. Then $25,000. Then $15,000. He varied the amounts, varied the accounts, varied the timing. He was careful. He was methodical. He was following a pattern of calculated theft that suggested he'd thought about this for a long time. Between late 1951 and March 1952, Marcus Chen stole $200,000. The money went into a separate account under a false name at a different bank. He wasn't spending it. He was accumulating it. Building what looked suspiciously like an escape fund. Except he wasn't escaping. He was negotiating. A man named Vincent Castellano represented the Genovese crime family's interests in Harlem. He wasn't a major figure in the mob hierarchy, but he was sufficiently connected to make serious offers. In early March 1952, Castellano approached Marcus Chen at a restaurant on the edge of Harlem territory. "We know what you're doing," Castellano said without preamble. "We know you're taking money from Johnson's operation. We know you've accumulated a significant amount. We're interested in a proposition." Marcus's hands were shaking. He'd been careful. How had they found out? What proposition? "Johnson's numbers operation is worth millions," Castellano said. "But it's only valuable because of the infrastructure you built. The accounts. The distribution channels. The relationships with the bankers. All of that is in your head and your ledger. Johnson is the symbol. But you're the system. You're worth more than Johnson." Marcus understood immediately where this was going. "You want me to sell the infrastructure. We want you to transfer the operation to us. Bring the ledger. Bring the account information. Bring everything. In exchange, you keep the $200,000 you've already taken. We give you an additional $300,000. We set you up in legitimate business in California. You disappear. You live a comfortable life. You never have to hide again." Marcus left the meeting without committing. But he didn't leave the offer. That was the moment everything changed. Because unknown to Marcus, one of the men sitting at a nearby table was working for Bumpy Johnson. A collector named David Martinez who had eyes and ears everywhere. And Martinez had heard everything. Bumpy Johnson's response to discovering embezzlement and betrayal simultaneously was not what anyone would expect. He didn't call Marcus in for a confrontation. He didn't arrest him or exile him or execute him. Instead, he did something far more sophisticated. He created a commission. Not an official commission, not something written down. Just 3 men who understood numbers and systems, Marcus Webb, Illinois Gordon, and a forensic accountant named Samuel Richardson who worked independently for various Harlem businesses but who owed Bumpy substantial favors. Their assignment was simple: find out everything. Not just the $200,000 Marcus had stolen, but where it came from. What accounts had been tapped. What routes the money had taken. Who he'd been meeting with. What was being offered. Build a complete picture of Marcus Chen's betrayal. "I want to know everything," Bumpy told them. "Not because I'm going to do anything immediately. But because I need to understand what I'm dealing with. Is this just a man stealing from me? Or is this the beginning of something larger? That's what I need to know." The investigation took 3 weeks. What they discovered was worse than simple theft. Marcus hadn't just been embezzling. He'd been negotiating the sale of the entire operation's infrastructure to the mob. He had meetings scheduled. He was planning to hand over account numbers, bank relationships, collector rosters, everything that made the organization function. It was total betrayal. Betrayal of trust, betrayal of loyalty, betrayal of the 13 years Bumpy had invested in making Marcus valuable. But Bumpy's response, when the investigation was complete, was still calculated. He didn't act immediately. Instead, he did something that seemed incomprehensible: he let Marcus continue working. For 2 weeks after the investigation was complete, Marcus came to the office, processed numbers, managed accounts, did his job exactly as he always had. He had no idea that Bumpy knew. No idea that Bumpy was waiting. No idea that every step he took toward meeting with Castellano again, every preparation he made toward handing over the ledger, was being documented by watchers positioned around the city. Marcus thought he was safe. Thought his betrayal was secret. Thought he was about to become $500,000 richer and escape to California to start a new life. He was being given enough rope to hang himself completely. Bumpy called Marcus into his office on a Thursday afternoon. Marcus came willingly, unsuspecting. He'd been preparing to meet with Castellano again on Friday. He thought the meeting in the office was routine. A check-in. Maybe Bumpy wanted to discuss quarterly projections. Maybe there were some questions about a few accounts. He sat down across from Bumpy's desk and discovered he was wrong about everything. Bumpy had the ledger open in front of him. Not Marcus's hidden ledger. The official one. The one that showed the discrepancies. "We need to talk about the accounts," Bumpy said quietly. Marcus's mouth went dry. "The accounts are fine." "Why?" "The accounts show withdrawals that don't correspond to any documented distributions. $200,000 over 18 months. You know anything about that?" Marcus tried to play confused. "I don't understand." "The books balance. The deposits match the payouts. I don't know what discrepancies you're referring to." Bumpy didn't raise his voice. "You're lying. Which means you've either developed a sudden incompetence that contradicts 13 years of perfect accounting, or you've been stealing. I'm betting it's the second one. I haven't stolen anything." Bumpy opened a second folder. Inside were documents. Bank statements from the false account. Photographs of Marcus meeting with Vincent Castellano. Dated, time-stamped, detailed. Evidence of every meeting, every negotiation, every preparation. Marcus's face went white. "Now I know about the theft," Bumpy continued. "But what I really want to know is about the Genovese family. What did you tell them? What were you planning to give them?" Marcus didn't answer. His hands were shaking. He was calculating options, looking for exits, trying to figure out if he could run right now, before anything worse happened. "The ledger," Bumpy said. "You were going to give them the ledger and the account information. You were going to hand over the entire infrastructure of this operation. 13 years of work. My investment in you. And you were going to hand it to them for $500,000 and a life in California." Still, Marcus said nothing. "Here's what's going to happen," Bumpy said. "You have a choice. Choice 1, I give you an hour. You leave Harlem. You go to Grand Central Station. You get on a bus to anywhere that isn't New York. You take whatever money you can carry. You disappear. You never contact anyone you know. You change your name. You build a new life somewhere that Italian families don't operate. You do that, and I don't pursue you." Marcus's eyes flicked toward the door. "Choice 2, Bumpy continued, you stay in Harlem. You don't run. You work for me to recover what you stole and to undo whatever damage you've tried to create with the mob. In exchange, I don't kill you. I don't exile you. But you work for me, and you understand that you're working under constant watch. You're no longer a lieutenant. You're no longer trusted. You're an asset that I own. And assets that fail to perform get liquidated." Marcus looked at Bumpy for a long moment. He was thinking about Catherine. Thinking about the 13 years. Thinking about the fact that even if he ran, the mob would find him. Castellano wouldn't let him just disappear with his knowledge and his silence. "I'll stay," Marcus said quietly. Bumpy nodded. "I thought you would." What happened next was, in many ways, worse than exile. Marcus stayed in Harlem. He continued working. But everything changed. First, Bumpy sent word to Vincent Castellano that Marcus's offer had been declined. The infrastructure wasn't for sale. The accounts couldn't be transferred. The operation would remain exactly where it was, exactly as it was. Castellano, furious, tried to retaliate. He sent men to intimidate Marcus, to remind him that the Genovese family didn't take rejection lightly. But they couldn't touch him. Bumpy had positioned watchers around Marcus continuously. Any approach resulted in those men being intercepted, beaten, sent back to the mob with a message: this man is off limits. More than that, Bumpy made it clear to every criminal organization in New York: Marcus Chen works for me. His debts are my debts. His enemies are my enemies. Anyone who moves against him moves against Bumpy Johnson's entire network. So the physical danger passed. But the psychological damage was permanent. Marcus came to the office every day. He managed the books every day. He did his job with the same precision he'd always shown. But nobody spoke to him anymore. Other employees would find reasons to be elsewhere when he entered a room. Collectors would hand him reports but wouldn't linger for conversation. He'd become invisible in a different way, not invisible because he was operating in the shadows, but invisible because he was treated as a liability, a man marked for failure, someone who couldn't be trusted. Worse than that, Bumpy made a change to the entire accounting system. Instead of Marcus being the sole keeper of all financial information, Bumpy established a committee. 3 people now had to sign off on all major transactions. 3 people had to approve all account transfers. 3 people had to verify all distributions. This meant that Marcus's position as the indispensable architect of the system was eliminated. He was now a custodian, a functionary, someone whose role could be delegated or reassigned at any moment. The message was clear: you tried to betray me, so I've removed your leverage. You're no longer necessary. You're no longer valuable. You're a redundant component in a system that can function perfectly well without you. By December 1952, 9 months into his punishment, Marcus had aged 10 years. His hair, which had been black with just traces of gray, was now more gray than black. He'd lost weight. He barely slept. He spent his days doing work that felt pointless, for an organization that had stopped acknowledging his existence, for a man who had decided to let him live but had made that life completely hollow. What most people misunderstand about the Bumpy Johnson story is that it was never really about Marcus Chen. It was about establishing a rule, one that would govern the entire organization. By the way Bumpy handled Marcus, he sent a clear message: I see everything. Even when I don't act, I know. Even when I wait, I don't forget. And if you betray me, I won't simply kill you. I'll erase your value so completely that you'll wish I had. This was far more frightening than execution. Execution is fast. It's final. You never experience the consequences. But forcing someone to live after everything meaningful has been stripped away, that's a different kind of punishment. One designed to teach, not just to end. The story spread through Harlem quickly. Every runner, collector, and manager understood the rules. Mistakes were tolerated. Time was given. Personal problems were understood. Patience was shown. But betrayal was different. For betrayal, Bumpy didn't kill. He let you live long enough to understand exactly what you'd lost. He removed your relevance and turned your continued existence into a warning for everyone else. This was psychological warfare at its most precise. In early 1953, Marcus Chen asked permission to leave Harlem. He said he wanted to start over, maybe in Atlanta. Bumpy agreed, but with conditions. Marcus knew too much. Accounts, routes, relationships. He was a liability anywhere he went. He was required to sign over all his knowledge to the organization's archive and report monthly for a year. If he ever contacted rival groups, the document would become evidence, enough to send him to federal prison. Marcus accepted. He left Harlem with just enough money to survive, never enough to rebuild. He moved south, worked quietly as a bookkeeper, and disappeared. He died in 1987, unknown, a man whose 13 years of power were erased by months of psychological dismantling. What happened to Marcus became a template. It proved that the most dangerous weapon in an underground empire isn't violence. It's information. Leverage. Control without visible force. Bumpy understood that loyalty and fear are inseparable. When loyalty breaks, violence is inefficient. Erasure lasts longer. Not death, but irrelevance. Bumpy's patience wasn't weakness. It was strategy. By waiting and gathering everything before acting, he kept every option open. He chose the response that taught the most and hurt the deepest. That's why Harlem remained stable while other organizations collapsed. Bumpy understood that power isn't about brutality. It's about intelligence, psychology, and knowing what people fear most. And often, what terrifies people isn't what you do to them. It's what you take away. Marcus Chen's story was never about crime or money. It was about realizing too late that an entire life was built on usefulness, and that usefulness can vanish. People can survive violence. But meaninglessness is harder. Marcus didn't lose his life. He lost his purpose. And in the end, Bumpy didn't eliminate Marcus Chen. Marcus erased himself. That was the point.